everyone, and welcome back to the Education Revolution 2025 edition. It is so good to be back talking with you again, even in this asynchronous format, because as you might be noticing out there, things be crazy. All right, we've got a lot of problems, socio-cultural, political things that are happening in our world. And education, as I've always said, is one of our most powerful levers to impact change. And we are here not for education discussions, not for education necessarily reimagining. We are here for education revolutions, which is purposeful change, radical, pervasive change in education. And it's when stuff hits the fan that kind of change is possible. So this year, what I wanted to do was to put out 15 revolutionary ideas, big ideas that are in education right now, so that we can talk about them, so that I can give a little bit of a frame, right, for what these big ideas could be about and the kinds of threads that they consider in education. And then we can have a bit of a back and forth in the comment section. And we can talk about how you're perceiving these things in education. AI, the changing role of educators, the idea of assessing in the age of automation, looking at experiential learning, looking at the funding issues for public education. What can we do with what we have? And I will not say the sentence, do more with less. What I'm interested in is realistic, possible, tangible, incremental shifts towards this radical, pervasive, revolutionary change. Because doing what you can in the moment is the most powerful thing we can do. Because often, as educators, as administrators in educational spaces, we lose hope. And we don't see change reflected on a day-to-day basis. We are continuously faced with brick walls and frustrating outcomes. What we can do together here is brainstorm around some of these revolutionary ideas to make them practical and realistic for your home contexts. Yes, that's right. I'm interested in education across all sorts of learner audiences. So we're not just going to talk about elementary, secondary. We're going to get into tertiary, higher education, adult learning contexts. I am also a new parent. Yay! So I am very, refueled, as it were. So many people, they talk about my energy and how much I love what I do, which is true. I absolutely love what I do. And I was that kid who I think I was like 8 years old, giving my mom those blank sheets of paper, or like hastily written math questions on a piece of paper and asking her to complete them so that I could like red check mark or X her responses, right? Always red, always red. I didn't like summer vacation. I always wanted to go back to school. So I know. I'm already a bit of an education fan. And as many of you have also heard, I'm a self-proclaimed assessment geek. So monitoring and evaluation, looking at assessment in the age of automation, what we're looking at from a competency-based standpoint, right? Some tangible process-based human socio-emotional skills. How do we assess and measure those effectively with constraints like time, money, energy, super important. I want to talk about these ideas over the course of this year as they apply and are actualized in real human contexts, right? We want to name the pain. We want to talk about what we would love to do in an ideal circumstance. And then we're going to land on some practical tips and tools to mobilize revolutionary change in line with some of these ideas. So this week, I wanted to just welcome everyone back to the podcast, and I wanted to point you towards what kind of resource this podcast will be, hopefully, for you over the coming year. And I wanted to name that this kind of change, this first big idea that we want to talk about today, is that the revolution isn't coming. It's here. And the world Our future is going to belong to those who are as actively involved in making decisions, conscious, informed decisions about our actions moving forward. And in no space, in my mind, does that have a potential, a greater potential impact than in educational environments. How you're going to choose to design your learning experiences, how you're going to act as a facilitator implementing those learning experiences, how you're going to define and measure success for your learners in order to set them up with what they need after the learning experience to apply knowledge in real world contexts. We are at a precipice, but it's not scary. It's exciting. Okay, it's also scary. It's like slightly terrifying, but let's focus on also how hopeful we can be in this moment, because education and the current gaps that we can see, the fissures that we used to see, and the now broadening gaps that we are seeing are just indications of where we can implement change, where we can make a new choice, where we can move our thinking and our practice in a new direction that ultimately is revolutionary. So some of these main gaps that we want to be considering and naming in today's episodes are resources, okay? Funding. As the Director of Academic Innovation for York University these last 3 years, as an educational consultant for decades before that, working with private and public sector institutions, looking at learning across various contexts and audiences, working in the NGO educational sector in various countries around the world. Money, time, human capital, energy, right? We can only do what we can do with what we have available to us. And we are, by design, as humans, constrained. Rightly so, right? That's why working in collectives, and we'll talk more about how to leverage community and peers and colleagues in this space, is so important as we move forward. But we need to first name the gap, and then what that gap does. What did I say? I want this to be very human, right? So when you don't have what you need, when you know that there's something that you want to do as an educator, when you know there's a better way to do it, but you are coming up against those constraints. Like, I am a first year accounting professor and I have 500 students, but I know that a multiple choice final exam is not the best way to assess skills. But what do I do? Or I know that I'm an HR representative in training, learning, and development in this private company. And I know that Articulate or Storyline, these passive, asynchronous modes of learning, are not the best way for staff members to acquire, demonstrate knowledge and skill assets. But that's what the company uses. And that's what we have a subscription for. What do I do? I am an elementary school teacher, and I believe in integrating some level of relevant technical aptitudes into my third grade classroom. But my parent population is extremely against the use of devices in any way, or I am a secondary school instructor that wants to prepare my learners to use AI with integrity, but my school board has banned the use of AI. What do I do, right? In my day, when I was a public school teacher in the TDSB, the Toronto District School Board, it was a question of, we don't have enough pencils or erasers. So all the educators go down to the dollar store and are buying notebooks and colored pencils. So this type of basic equipment is now, it was where these deficits used to lie, but now the gap in investment in tangible resources has extended beyond equipment. Equipment itself has evolved in terms of what instructors need to be teaching learners effectively in the digital age, and those equipment gaps are still real. It's just probably not a dollar store solve. But it goes beyond that. It goes now towards the model that I have been taught, or the model I was taught in terms of what teaching and learning looks like in these classrooms. Even just using the word lecture, right? Like, I'm a lecturer in higher education because the lecture is the model for higher education. But I now know, like, I am getting so disrupted in the world of AI, automation, skills-based learning, does school even matter anymore world, that I know I need to alter my design. But altering my design, it's not just that I don't have enough equipment and I can go down to the dollar store. It's like I need to talk to certain people and I don't have access to those people. I need certain training and I don't have access to that kind of training to better understand how to do this effectively in my classroom or in my course. We are in resource impoverished state. We don't have the people, the money, the equipment, the spaces, the time. Can you believe that I left that resource till last? We don't have the time, okay? I'm a mother of a toddler, a single mother, and a business owner, and so I understand. This is the crisis of time where we're supposed to continue to perform. I come across this all the time in private sector trainings where they are taught to interact with one another, communicate differently, collaborate differently, develop certain skill assets, but yet the quotas in terms of what they have to perform or produce doesn't change. Their schedules don't change. They don't get any sort of time to implement or actualize these kinds of changes in their workplaces. So this podcast is going to be a resource in that regard, for that truth, that the revolution is not coming, it's here. We are at a precipice of resource poverty. We are going to talk about how to do things in a realistic, not an ideal, in a realistic fashion as we move forward. Okay. So that's something I want to name on the outset, that you can expect that as we move forward with the other ideas to follow over 2025. The other one is that we need to get right with ourselves. So we are cognitively lazy creatures, right? Mammals are looking for things that are proximal, familiar. This is just the way our brains work. We are trying to conserve energy. So while I know I get super excited about this stuff, I am also very aware of the neurobiology of mammals. So what the truth that I want to name here, the second truth I want to name here today, is that we need to better understand ourselves in order to sustain this work. And I will make an effort in each subsequent podcast to make sure that not only am I offering tips and tricks, but I'm also considering ways that you can support yourself and try to maintain a level of mental wellness, psychological, emotional balance, while you are trying to grapple with and work with and implement some of these big ideas, understand and work with some of these big ideas. This is also a revolution that is here. It's not coming, it's here. We have never lived in a culture. When I look at my parents' generation and then my grandparents' generation, the way we are allowed to have needs, the way we are taught actively and through these different channels, Brene Brown, to have boundaries, right? That setting a boundary is actually how I will be more generous and giving in life is something that previous generations have not been afforded. We have never before been inundated with so many tools, probably too many, which is why it's very overwhelming, this wellness industry. But the point is, this idea of being self-aware, cultivating a sense of self-awareness, being mindful, is no longer reserved for yoga practitioners, all right? Gurus sitting in temples. We are empowered as individuals sitting in urban societies, wherever you are in the world. There is a narrative, there is language around taking care of yourself, that you matter. Now, whether or not you are setting those boundaries is another question, right? Whether or not it's easier to set them with certain people and harder to set them in other environments and contexts I totally hear ya. But I want to bring that human element into this conversation as well, because that self-care revolution is upon us. It has been upon us, and it is so integrated and connected to this idea of educational revolution, because education is humans working with humans. Teaching and learning is a personal, intimate, even online, even in asynchronous contexts. I'm teaching a hybrid course right now, and I'm connected. I feel I'm getting students sharing personal stories. I fully believe that the human component of education does not need to be excluded from automated versions of this process, the teaching and learning process. So in that regard, there are gaps and fissures in terms of us doing this work right now, and that is revolutionary in education, and it presents an opportunity. And coinciding with these real disruptions in education is this narrative of we matter, take care of yourself, let's be sustainable in our practices in a variety of ways, environmentally, personally sustainable in the choices that we make, so that we can make these small, incremental, informed decisions to move towards new models of teaching and learning. Yes, everybody, let's do it. New models of teaching and learning without sacrificing. Beyond that, by recognizing and supporting the humans at the core of the teaching and learning process. So yes, that's going to be about our students and our learners, but that is also about us as educators. We have to be there. We have to take care of ourselves. Otherwise, we can't show up for other people. We know that in our personal lives, but somehow I feel a great kinship with the nursing industry as educators. You know, somehow we have dehumanized the agents in care, where nurses and educators are meant to just go around and perform teaching and learning without truly understanding how intimate and personal and giving and generous these caregiving professions are. So if I want the revolution to stick, as you know I do, then every week moving forward, we're going to make sure that we're talking about these big ideas in practical, tangible ways when it comes to your resources, and in meaningful, mindful ways when it comes to your wellness and your self-care. I know, it's a lot, right? It's a lot. Well, you'll have to keep me honest in this promise, but this idea that we are ready to embrace the change that is upon us and move towards these radical, pervasive changes has kind of been in me since I was born. So I think I'll stay true to that one. And I have, over the course of my last 20 years, 2 decades out of 4 so far, really realized, and having a child only hits home something that I learned very clearly as an educator as well, which is you don't have a never-ending supply of attention, compassion, and love and empathy. You know, we are as generous as we can be when we are as generous as we can be with ourselves. So you can rest assured that I'm not just going to spout ideals at you. My mother, I'll leave this week's episode with this is the kind of, my mother is a really important part of my support network. So she ties into me being able to care for myself as I do the work in life. And she, in the practical sense of taking advantage of some of these disruptions and fissures that have grown so large in education, but realistically so, gifted me a card once that I still have that says, shoot for the moon because you can land amongst the stars. So that's what we're going to do here, folks. We're going to talk about some big ideas, what it might look like to shoot for the moon, and how we can practically land amongst the stars. I'll see you next week when we talk about AI. Gotta start strong. Start with that artificial intelligence that's freaking everybody out. Question: will AI replace educators? Yes, no? We'll talk about it next week. The Education Revolution podcast is produced in-house by community members, and I'm your host, Dr. Michelle Sangera. Thank you for listening to this week's episode, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and head over to my website to opt in for my newsletter for more ways to connect with some of these big ideas.